What's going on, everybody? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at the best $100 low-profile GPU that we've seen in a very, very long time. Now, this will be perfect for small form factor 1080p builds. And recently on the channel, actually a couple weeks ago, we took a look at the Mini ITX version of this card. And personally, I do think it's a great 1080p performer. But this is going to be going in a very small form factor build. I do think that this card is a great option for people out there looking for a cheaper, low-profile card, and this is going to be going inside of a 5-liter build. Now, we've got an overkill CPU here, but I really wanted to get the most out of this card, so we didn't have a CPU bottleneck. And this is known as the Intel Arc A380 Low Profile Edition from ASRock. Now, inside of the box, you do get a larger profile bracket, but it does come pre-installed with the low profile. It is a single slot card, but the cooler on it is quite large, so I would suggest having enough room for a dual slot. But just keep that in mind because as you can see, it is kind of a thick boy when it comes to these, but overall, it's still a very small form factor GPU. Now, I'll go ahead and say it. This isn't going to be the most powerful low-profile GPU on the market. That kind of goes to the Gigabyte low-profile RTX 4060, but you got to keep in mind that actually requires an 8-pin power connector, but this doesn't require any extra power except for what the PCIe slot can provide. For this video, we're going to be installing this in a super small form factor PC and running a lot of tests, but before we get started here, I do want to mention that this video is brought to you by Urcdkeys. I've actually been using this site for a couple years now. They do offer Steam keys, Origin, Uplay. They even offer Microsoft applications like Office, but the main reason that I use Urcdkeys is for their Windows keys. Right now, their Windows 10 Pro OEM key is $19.84, but if you use code ETA at checkout, you can get 25% off. And another great thing about buying from here is they do accept PayPal. I just did this build here. I need to activate Windows. I'm going to head over to my updates and security. We're going to go to activation. As you can see, I've got Windows 10 Pro, but it's not activated. So I'm going to change product key. I'm going to paste it in here, choose next, choose activate, and Windows is now activated. My warning is totally gone. They'll email your code once your payment is processed, and that's basically it. If you're interested in picking up cheap Windows 10 keys for your new PC builds, I'll leave a link in the description. It's definitely not going to win any design awards. We've got a very plain Jane card. It's got a full-size HDMI, full-size DisplayPort, aluminum heatsink, and a dual fan cooling system. No crazy RGB or anything like that. And again, I want to stress this point. Even though it's a single slot card, you may need enough room for a dual slot given how large this cooler is. If you're a regular viewer of the channel, it's no secret that I am a big fan of these ARC cards. I love seeing them come to market and kind of compete with the big boys. And over time, these cards have gotten really good due to driver updates. And the A380 is no different. Now, when it comes to the specs of the ASRock version we have here, we've got a base clock of 2,250 megahertz with a boost up to 2450. 6 gigabytes of GDDR6 running at a 96-bit bus, 8 Xe cores, 128 XMX engines, and this one, since it's the low profile, runs at up to 45 watts. I believe the larger counterpart can do up to 75. I think we were right there around 62 watts. But yeah, maximum here, 45 due to not having an extra power connector. In order to test the low-profile Arc A380, I did want to shove it inside of one of my small form factor builds. And again, this is definitely overkill for the A380. You won't need this much CPU performance. But basically what we've got here is a Ryzen 7 7700X, 32 gigabytes of DDR5, and I've clocked it up to 6,000 megahertz in this system. A Gigabyte A620i Mini ITX motherboard, 2 terabyte PCIe 4.0 NVMe SSD. When it comes to the cooler, I'm using the Thermalright AXP120X67, so it's only 67 millimeters tall with this low profile fan on it, and it does fit inside of this case. And speaking of this case, it's actually known as the A24V5 dual slot. You can pick these up on AliExpress. I'll leave links for everything I'm using in this build in the description in case you want to put something like this together. But as you can see, the low-profile version of that A380 fits in here really nicely. Don't need an extra power connector, and usually with this build, we've got that RTX 4060 in here. But I think this would be an awesome little build. I mean, going with a CPU that's maybe a little lower end. I'm on an AM5 platform right now, but I would suggest building this along with, let's say, an AM4 platform. You can pick those parts up pretty cheap right now, and especially if you want to go secondhand. When it comes down to it, building mini ITX with AM5 really isn't great right now due to mini ITX board prices, but going with an older CPU combination here would be really awesome for a card like this. Okay, so just taking a closer look here, we've definitely got an overpowered CPU for this GPU. I'm also running 32 gigs of DDR5 at 6000, and of course, we've got that ARC A380. 6 gigs of GDDR6 VRAM, and there's a little bit of tweaking and tuning that we can do with this from the ARC Control Center. So from here, we can automatically update our drivers, we can set up different game profiles, but the performance section, especially configure, is going to be important to some people. Performance boost, we can go up to 100 megahertz here from this software. We can also overvolt the GPU, but remember for this video, we're not going to be doing any overclocking. GPU core power limit, this will do up to 45 watts. We can also change the temp limit and the fan speed. So we've got a little bit of tweaking that we can do here. And real quick, I want to show you what this really runs at. So if I stress this GPU out, I've been seeing consistent wattage of around 39, even though they state that this can go up to 45. Now in some cases, I've seen it jump up there every once in a while, but around 39, 40 watts is right there where this A330 low profile is going to be. So far, just been doing some basic testing like 4K video playback and everything like that. Not a problem for the A380. I mean, installing this in a PC that you're just going to be using as an everyday desktop would be an awesome option. You could definitely get away with something, you know, a bit cheaper or even used, but just to have that extra power in a newer card is pretty nice. But of course, the main thing I'm concerned about with this card is gaming. But before we get into that, I want to show you some benchmarks that I ran here. First up, we've got 3D Mark Night Raid coming in with a 38,627. And, I actually thought we'd see a little higher GPU score here, but still beating out all of the iGPUs on the market. Moving over to Firestrike, 10,002. And finally, Time Spy with a 4,468. Now, just to put this into perspective for you, I say the closest card here would be something like the low-profile 1650, and that scores around a 3600 here with Time Spy, so at least with these synthetics, it is beating out that 1650. But now it's time to see how this thing handles real-world gaming. So first up, we've got Spider-Man Miles Morales. We're at 1080p medium settings, and I am using Intel scaling technology known as XeSS set to balanced. I got an average of around 67 FPS, and we've still got more that we could do here. We could actually take it to performance or even try the built-in scaling option for this game here, which in some cases, at least for a lot of the Radeon stuff that I test, does help out a little bit more than their proprietary FSR. But XeSS is doing a great job here, and the game is fully playable. I also wanted to go back a bit to one of my favorite games. We've got OG Skyrim, high settings, 1080p, and I do have an unlocked frame rate. So this will run at 60 all day long, and on average, we're actually getting around 72 FPS. I also wanted to run Shadow of the Tomb Raider's built-in benchmark. We're at high settings, 1080p with XeSS set to balanced. We got an average of 72 FPS, actually did much better than I thought it would here. But when I moved over to the God of War PC port, I did have to drop this down to 900p. So we're at original settings, 900p, and it's not bad, but I was really thinking that we could handle this at 1080. I also wanted to see if this setup would handle Cyberpunk 2077, and yeah, it will at 1080p low with XeSS set to performance. So we did have to take those settings down with this one to get over 60, and we got an average of 72 FPS. Not bad, but you can definitely tell the difference when XeSS is set to performance as opposed to balanced. And of course, we had to test out Starfield. This is just one of those games that doesn't play very well with ARC, at least the lower end cards. Right now, we're at low, and we're at the lowest resolution scale we can go. We're right there at around 31 FPS on average, but there are some bugs going on. With every ARC card that I've tested and Starfield, if it's running well, and then I go into the settings and change absolutely anything, come back out, it's going to fall right on its face. It's definitely a big issue they have going on, so, if you're getting good performance going into it, just leave the settings where they're at. So overall, I think the low-profile A380 at a $99 price tag is actually a great low-profile card. In most of the stuff that we're testing here, it is getting better performance than the GTX 1650, and of course that card's getting dated. And I'm really glad to see that we've got a cheaper option for these small form factor builds. Now, it's not going to blow everybody out of the water. It's not a 1440p card, definitely not a 4K card, but a lot of the stuff at 1080p works out great on the low-profile ARC A380. Now, if you're looking for the absolute best low-profile gaming card, then Gigabyte has you covered with their RTX 4060, but that's coming in much more expensive than this A380, and it does require an 8-pin PCIe power connector. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Is this a card that you're thinking about picking up for your small form factor build? And if so, I will leave some links down below. Newegg always has this on sale for $99, and that's the perfect time to scoop it up. If you've got any questions, or if there's anything else you want to see running on the A380 low profile, let me know in the comments below. And like always, thanks for watching.